Messaging to me is a long-term initiative because it's never a said and done thing, right? You can say, okay, the messaging is done, clock in, clock out, let's go. We can go back to managing campaigns. Markets are shifting, new competitors are going in, others are going in graveyards. There is always moving parts, but when you tackle messaging, what you need is to understand a lot of what's moving the needle, right? How are we bringing money today? Why are we bringing money today? Why do people love us? And why do they keep staying with us today?
Hey everyone, welcome to On Messaging, a show for B2B product marketers on how to create messaging that resonates with your audience. I'm your host, Josh Chronister, and on the show today we have Gab Bujold, messaging strategist and co-host of We're Not Marketers podcast. Gab's helped over 30 B2B SaaS worldwide nail their product messaging. Before moving into being a messaging consultant, Gab was heading product marketing at BizDev Labs. In our conversation, Gab shares how to listen to understand your customers, steps to running effective message testing, how to create differentiation in your messaging, what is message market fit, and why it's needed before product market fit, and so much more. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcast app, YouTube, or Substack. It's the best way to get notified of every new episode. All right, let's jump into the conversation. Gab, thank you for coming on. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Josh. It's an honor.
Yeah, I was so excited when, I reached out to you on LinkedIn, just cold DM. We haven't really interacted too much. Obviously, I see a lot of your awesome messaging work on LinkedIn. You're part of a podcast that, a lot of marketers are pretty familiar with as well, product marketers specifically. And I was stoked when you were like, hey, let's do it. So here we are.
Yeah, man. Always excited to chat messaging,
Mm-hmm. You're part of a somewhat controversial podcast, We're Not Marketers. From what I gather, your opinion is that product marketers aren't marketers. Let's hear why.
Yeah. The thing is, controversy sell. Like, the last thing we wanted when we started a podcast a year ago was, hey, let's do what everyone else is doing, right? And I think this is a big flaw in B2B. We're scared of being unhinged, we're scared of being weird, and we just decide to kind of follow the leader a little bit. For that podcast, basically, I very much believe that PMMs are not marketers, and I'll get into that a bit later. But the origin story come up with one of our co-hosts, Eric, was a PMM, and then he got kind of like a promotion, I guess you could call it that, to a head of marketing. And then our initial reaction is, awesome, dude, cool. Now good role, seems like you get a pay bump out of it. And he said, no, now they don't want me to do PMM stuff. They just fired the intern and they want me to just bring leads. So we kind of started in the discussion that Eric, with his background, didn't really had to bring leads in any way. And of course, there's different dimension of organization, of startup, that you need to ship, you need to deliver. But he said, my skills from being a PMM don't really translate to the new role that they're asking me, right? So he just said, like, oh, well, I mean, we're not even marketers. And then it kind of just stick because it was very controversial. But it's not like we came up with it, right? We saw the Product Marketing Alliance kind of came up and asked their hot take to a bunch of PMMs, and we saw it. We saw PMMs on marketers or strategists, expert, and enablers, or something like that. And then what we did is we tested the water. So I did a post. I said, product marketers or non-marketers, I know it has marketers in the title, but hear me out. It blew up. I got called, hey, you're a shitty marketer. You don't know what marketing is. Yeah. And I was like, that's perfect. This is exactly what we want. I felt uncomfortable, but this is what you want. When people disagree, that means that some people will agree.
Yeah.
And today, even if the three of us believe that we're not marketers, most guests don't agree with us. Most listeners, even, like back in season 1, we did a survey and 20% of our audience only agreed that PMMs were not marketers. But at the end, who cares, right? What we're trying to do here is we're trying to remove product marketing from being in an existential crisis. And by asking experts, by pushing it, by trying to define it, hopefully we'll get there. Hopefully we'll be able to give more influence to product marketers and making sure that we can kind of reinvent the role, or at least setting up benchmark or guardrails of what good look like, basically.
What do you think are benchmarks, or does it have its own function, product marketing, say within an organization? Where do you see it fitting?
That's a good question. Based on a couple of calls that we had, I heard a lot of different answers. Yilin Pei said that technically we're business strategists, but I feel like, again, if you're in business, a pretty broad term, and I don't think it would fall under like a specific category. But there's a keyword here that is very interesting: business strategist. So I think the strategy part where would be where PMMs would live. So probably under a chief strategy officer. Um, this is kind of where I'm seeing that go in a little bit if we had to put it into a category. But it's like I say it's like, there's a bunch of other roles. Like if you take Martech folks, for example, sometimes they're seen as marketers, sometimes they're seen as data people.
Yeah.
So they still have kind of like an existential crisis a little bit. So to me, product marketers, even if we're not put in a category, as long as you're clear and you're able to explain this is what I do and this is what I don't,
Mm-hmm.
internally and externally, ultimately this is when we can just have uh, attaching more value to our role and to the outcome we can bring, and potentially, blocking us from layoffs and showcasing that we can bring a lot of value, and a lot of companies can be successful with product marketing
Yeah.
when you understand the role and what you can do with it.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen that too. Of a lot of times there's so many job titles out there related to what product marketing does. That's not even a product marketing job title. But on the other side of that too, you see the product marketing
Yeah.
job title, and from company to company, that role can be completely different. Like at some companies, product marketing is the growth person, is in charge for bringing in leads and driving demos and driving growth for the product. Where on the other side, at maybe a different company, it's very specific to strategy. They're sitting on the product team, or they're sitting on underneath a chief strategy officer, like you said. And yeah, it just seems like
Yeah.
there's a lot of discrepancy there. So I love the theme of y'all's podcast. It is controversial. I can see how a lot of people disagree with it. I think I have a different take on it too. But that's what makes it interesting. That's what makes
Oh,
it
I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
my thoughts on if product marketers are marketers.
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Okay. I had a feeling you were going to ask me this question as a follow up. I gave it a little bit of thought, and I believe 100% that product marketers are marketers. I think the product marketing function, in the way that I see the product marketing function, it really goes back to what is the fundamentals of marketing. The four P's: product, price, promotion, place. That is what marketing is supposed
Yep.
to be. And in my opinion, I think that in a typical product marketing role, a product marketer does all four of those things. That's core to what their position is for. So to me, that comes back and just inherently says that a product marketer is a marketer because it's doing the core functions of what marketing should be responsible for. That's my take.
It's a good argument, and I don't want to remove some of your thunder, but I heard this one a lot as well. I
Okay,
think
I'm
it's
sure.
like the counter argument is the counter argument is everyone does marketing basically. Every good employee in a well-oiled startup that is shipping basically do marketing. Everyone has to push something on the market. Your understanding of your market context, your understanding of your internal resources, and the way everything change and shift is marketing. So if you're putting yourself not in that category, you need to maybe open your horizon a little bit. But
Mhm.
yes, I think the thing is, because with like just the growth of tech and all of the sub roles and sub responsibilities that got created, a lot of marketers kind of lost, I guess, the core elements that are actually making a difference, right? When I was a solo marketer, I was very junior, true, but I was also kind of trying by myself to push new things, right? To
Yeah.
test new stuff, to try new channels. Like I started in growth marketing, so I was like, okay, it's all about testing, it's all about results, it's all about how can we bring it home.
Mhm.
But it rarely depend on the product. It's almost always on the problem, right? That's why
Yeah.
sometimes with clients call, they're like, do you want to see the solution? And I'm like, I'm not even there. I want to understand how painful the problem is and can I do something to help you with it? If you're telling me you have a GPT wrapper, I'll be like, I guess you can maybe find a lot of other people that can help you, but I don't think I will.
Yeah. Let's dive into that a little bit more. I've heard you talk about that too. You've been a solo marketer, I think, 4 times, if I'm right. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong there. But
Yep.
I also wanted to dive a little bit deeper into messaging too. So you've been a sole marketer 4 times. What was the process like building a messaging foundation as a solo?
Right. That's a very good question. I would say it's always, you know, messaging to me is a long-term initiative
Mhm.
because it's never a said and done thing, right? You can say, okay, the messaging is done, clock in, clock out, let's go. We can go back to managing campaigns. Uh, Markets are shifting, new competitors are going in, others are going in graveyards. There is always moving parts, but when you tackle messaging, what you need is to understand a lot of what's moving the needle, right?
Mm.
How are we bringing money today? Why are we bringing money today? Why do people love us? And why do they keep staying with us today? And those questions basically help us understand, well, this is the different areas of problem we're solving. This is the aspiration of those people. This is the fear that they have. This
Mm.
is the frustration that they actually deal with. And by having that context, then messaging becomes more clear. You can get a couple of headlines, you can get taglines, you can get a bunch of stuff. And I'm not saying that I always had the process and the frameworks I have today when I was a full-time solo marketer, but it always kind of come up with that angle. Do I understand enough about the context and the customer we have? And then it was, okay, well, how do we put it in a way where we have foundational stuff that we can say that will be consistent enough to make sense in the mind of prospects and customers if we want to help sell them for some reason.
Mhm.
So every time that it went back to that, it was always that specific core angle that was in the back of my head. And it all started with one of my first role in B2B SaaS. I was working for a desktop as a service startup called V2 Cloud. And I was like, okay, so this product is virtualization. Virtualization can have 8 different use cases. Let's just run with that. So did SEO for that, got like an insane, not an insane, but like a pretty good result. I feel like in 2 years with SEO, we went from, I think it's 562% in increased in monthly leads
Wow.
stacked after 2 years.
Yeah.
Just with SEO. The thing is, most of those leads were not qualified because I was focusing on the product, not the problem.
Mm.
Even
When,
if like the main customer base is looking for a testing tool or to test the network security or to hire remote workers, all of those are different use case.
yep.
So it doesn't make sense to pay X amount of dollar or buy X software if your use case is going to be different, right? If I want to provide secure and remote access to workers worldwide, I want a solution that actually walk the talk. And this solution might be different than the alternatives out there. So basically what happened was I got that traffic. Then I was told by sales, this doesn't work. We're getting very bad leads. And then we hired a fractional CMO, shout out Mitch Solway, and he showed me how valuable was talking to customers. So we interviewed like 25 people together, and we realized that, okay, so those were the key problems. This is what we needed to do. Saw how valuable positioning, customer interviews, and messaging were. and decided to just go all in as a PM afterward, like repositioning myself from a growth marketer to a PMM.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I replicate that with a fintech startups called Allswealth that was very early stage. And again, we did kind of a similar process. We did interviews. We understood what were the alternatives and everything else. And then I did it as well at BizDev Lab when I was product marketing lead. So my role, I helped with marketing, but I also helped just operationalizing uh, the way the agency was working at BizDev Lab. So it still is a lead gen agency. And the approach was, okay, so when I start working with those B2B SaaS startups, I need to understand their messaging, their positioning, their best customers, and what's the direction they want to take to lead their growth market. So I was just able to replicate it in a handful of different uh, settings, and you just give me the confirmation of, hey, this is money, right? Like, this, people need that. This is a big, big, big problem. I need to tackle it more, and this is why I decided to go all in as myself.
Love it. What was your process of getting on a call with a customer? Did you have to run through the sales team or the account manager, or did you reach out to them directly?
Good question. In smaller orgs, I was reaching out to them directly because most of the part, like I didn't really had a relationship with them because as it is, it's often gatekept by sales. So what I did is I just came up with a list of like when in the CRM just became obsessed with like this is the MR they're giving us. This is basically the type of company. This is all of these settings of number of virtual machine they're using, money set, software use, and all of that, just to kind of put it in specific categories. Then what we did is I reached out. I said, "Hey, head of marketing at B2 Cloud, mind if we chat?" And the idea was, I'm always doing those chat with people every 6 months, every 3 months. I just want to kind of double check and confirming why are you working with us? Why are you finding it valuable? And everything is going to be about you within 30 minutes. So people are like, okay, cool. And I started the conversation every time the same. It's always, you know, talk to me about you. People love talking about themselves, right? I'm sure you know it. By having a podcast, you just show a little bit of interest in people, and like the path is clear. Like it goes, you get those golden insights, and it's even better when people are your customers because the flow will just naturally fall under, well, I didn't really wanted to talk to you guys about it, but I had a good or bad experience with you guys, and this is what it is. And then what I was doing is I was synthesizing it, and this was before AI. I was synthesizing it, and I was just shipping it to like the dev, the sales team, and the marketing team as well.
I love that. I love that. And it sounded like you set kind of a precedent at the beginning of the call of this isn't a sales call. You can be open and honest with what you say here, because if you say something extremely bad or about one person or the process or something like that, it's just genuine good feedback. Um, did you find anyone being
Yeah.
like really hesitant to responding to any questions that you had?
At first, man, I sucked so much. It was like, and again, probably because English is not my first language, but at that time I was not really in a position when I was talking as much as possible in English. So some of my questions were a bit confusing. When you ask a question and you end up asking three different questions, just for the person that is on the receiving end, it's
Yeah.
impossible to navigate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is going to be all over the place. So what I was doing afterward when I started ramping it up, it's just basically showing empathy and trying to really understand what they're saying, right?
Yeah.
What I mean by that is just showcasing active listening. Um, as much as possible, when I work with clients, early stage startups, they understand that they are talking to customers, most of them, but they are not necessarily talking to customers. You understand? They are doing it in a way where it's sales centric, where it's we try to close deals, and who can blame them? The goal is to make money, the goal is to grow, the goal is to scale. But in a context where it's either a job to be done interview or a buyer's journey interview or just something that you're trying to kind of identify how they're using your solution, it's a different context. And that
Mm-hmm.
different context all you need to do is just be ready to listen and trying to dig a little bit deeper into what they're trying to tell you basically.
Yeah.
I got some calls with prospects for a customer in the mental health space, and we're talking about, it's not, oh, how do you tag your leads in your CRM? No, it was, oh, we don't have a health plan that covers mental health sessions, and I had problems in my personal life when I needed to access this. So someone
Yeah.
is telling you that like the last thing you you don't want to do is to show empathy. Yeah, like immediately I was like very wanted to dig into what they were saying. And at the end I was like, do you have any comments? What did you feel about like the call we had? And everyone was like, you are a very good listener, and it was a lot more fun and casual than I was expecting. And
Mhm.
that's the key. It should just be a conversation very similar to the one we're having right now.
Yeah.
Uh, just try to understand that everyone has problem and problem sucks, and
Hmm.
it's not fun. But when you talk about it, when you start digging into it, when you start to understand what do you mean by it's frustrating, you
Hmm.
get so much insights, right? And I'm not saying that just talk to customers. Again, this will fall under the junk food advice part that we talked about. Um, but do it in a way to understand what gaps do I have in my understanding of my prospects or my market. What missing part or what gray area is stopping me from this is an assumption into this is a fact. This is some stuff that someone said to me directly on the call.
Yeah.
And once you have that, your market research and crafting your key messages will be drastically different.
Oh man, I love this. When you're speaking, I wrote down listen to understand rather than listening to fix. Trying to
Yep.
understand their perspective of what they have this problem. We know they have this problem. Why do they have this problem? And instead of chiming in and saying, well, we can fix this problem with da 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 da, it's just diving deeper into it, getting to know them, who they are. Is it a problem outside of work too? Is it causing some type of stress? And you kind of jumped on that too. And like, you had that conversation with a mental health company and they dove deeper into the problem they were having. I love that. I love that so much. You you mentioned junk food advice. I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but can you kind of describe what you mean when you say junk food advice, especially around messaging?
Yeah. So to me, junk food advice is saying that, okay, so I'm a messaging expert and your messages needs to be clear, not clever. And I ended at that, right?
Yeah.
No explanation, no layers of depth, no meaning into what different types of clarity is, what different types of cleverness is. If you just be surface level into explaining a concept that you didn't came up with, to me it falls under junk food advice. It's like it's like the process of right now I'm doing a lot of research on messaging, on message testing, on trying to understand how much does high speed clarity weigh in into having those impactful results. And a big part of doing that is just researching and studying what's out there and then coming up with my own concepts. And the last point of all of this could be a quote, right? I could take all of my hours of research and summarize it in a quote that people will be like, hey, this is pretty good. To me, junk food advice is coming up with a quote, but not the research. It's saying something that sounds good, but doesn't has any depth behind it.
Yeah. Very it's I feel like we see that a lot on, places like LinkedIn and other places like that where people can easily share information, Twitter, X, whatever. Of it's a very repeatable thing too. Junk food is a lot of it tastes the same. It's either salty or sweet, crunchy, whatever.
Exactly. It's feel good
But
a
it's
little bit. It can almost
huh.
be said as feel good content almost.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh man, that's awesome. I love that analogy. Um, let's dive a little bit into your specialty, message market fit. Can you talk a little bit more about what is message market fit and why is it important?
Yeah, so I'll say my own definition. I didn't came up with the term. There's someone. very smart that wrote a book on it recently, Jonathan Hofsumer. I'm currently reading it, and so far it's pretty good. But it's a term that kind of started in the 2010. Um, but to me, message market fit is kind of like the baby step to product market fit. It's an index that tells you if your messaging resonates with your ICP with the current market conditions. So it's not a set it up once and then it's good. It's something that basically will tell you, okay, so it's working right now. And as a marketer or not a marketer, if you're a PMM and you believe in my point of view, when there's that signals that it's working, that moving target, okay, we have message market fit. It's the time to put the pedal to the metal and really push your campaign to another level, right? So it's basically a way that if you're trying to achieve product market fit, you need repeated revenue. And for early stage startups, it's like step 10 based on where they are right now.
Okay.
You should always try to first make sure your ICP is clear, make sure you have your key messages, and then make sure you can test it effectively. Those three components by itself, with basically just a way when you can grade and score and understand if you have a progression of your delta on how accurate your messaging is, will help you get there. At least that's my train of thought.
Okay. So you kind of have that beginning stages if you're an early stage startup of knowing your ICP, knowing your core messages, but say, and that's step one, two, three. Step 10 is more of the message market fit. What's kind of that in between stage then?
Step 10 in that case is more product market fit.
Okay.
And that's a good question. I would say the different stages are more that, like, I don't necessarily believe that product market fit is like a destination, because when you take a look at Lenny's podcast, he did a very nice article and research on it, but it's like some companies are Series E and Series D, and they never got the feeling that they got to PMF, right?
Mm.
So in my case, once you get to message market fit, it's a signal, it's an index. Okay, now it's working. Then it's a situation of how do I get my, I don't know, let's say you're very, very early stage, you have no customer. How do I get my first 10 customers? How do I get my first 100? How do I get my first 1,000? It's just different steps, different layers with different set of problems. So in a very bad answer, I don't have the complete steps that you should follow.
Yeah.
But the way I'm seeing it and the way I'm kind of focusing on it is, if you want to get those lagging indicators, replies, demos, close one, revenue, first you have to understand what's your ICP data. Is it clear enough? And when I mean clear enough, I mean very clear. Like, you're not bundling everyone together and you're like, oh, all B2B tech companies from 50 to 5,000 employees. Like, nothing like that. But once you're able to understand it, then you need to score your message market fit with a set of qualitative and quantitative elements. Then based on that, based on your score, on your self-grade assignment, if it needs improvement, you should probably reframe your ICP, because those are very much aligned. 30% of your message market fit weighed in on your ICP alignment. If the target is wrong, your foundation is crap and it won't work. And based on that ICP reframe, you should understand that, do you have any data that is missing? If you talk to customer every day, like some founders told me, I have 1,000 of sales calls on the back of my head. And I'm like, okay, fine. But then I start digging and I realize it's in your head. It's not documented.
Mm.
It's not set up in a way when you can communicate it effectively. And if you're unable to communicate key information within your business, it's going to be challenging to go to market effectively, right?
Yeah.
So just to summarize, scoring your message market fit, if it needs improvement, reframing the ICP, and then identifying what data you need. And then what I do is I craft key messages with those people. Like, okay, let's try to understand what's our value prop, what's our benefit, what's our feature, what's our capabilities. Let's craft the strategic aspect based on the direction we want to take. And then we identify a testing structure together. And then we test those messages out. And we try to make sure that, okay, are we actually delivering results with this? Are we actually having signals that we could get to those lagging indicators later on? And then this is when you can set a precedent of, okay, we're actually improving, or we're not just testing for the sake of saying that we're running A/B tests. with like 40 people that won't give us any insight out of it.
I love this. You're bringing in the message testing, and that was a question I had a little later on, but I want to jump into that right now. So, say you're a product marketer, you're listening right now. How can they run message testing, and maybe what are some of the steps of running that rather than just doing an A/B test with a few customers? What steps would you take?
Right. I think it always depends on the stage of the company a little bit. Um, for example, there's a company called Mindstone, and the company started in 2020, and back in 2021, their whole messaging was it's a way to learn faster with web pages, PDFs, and academic paper basically. Um, and I think it was an interesting messaging. But then, the market is changing, everything is evolving. Uh, I think we saw a couple of like education companies go under because of ChatGPT and AI. And I don't know exactly the timing, but what they did is right now, this company is showing you how to understand AI from a practical use. So they pivoted, they changed their messaging, and today you can go there to understand like how does AI agent work? How can you do search effectively with Perplexity or GPT?
Mhm.
So it's still the same positioning, making people learn faster stuff, but their scope is related to understanding practical AI, basically.
Yeah.
So, quick parenthesis here. But if we go back to how I would approach message testing, um, the first thing I like to ask and I try to understand is the ICP clear, right? And I might sound like a broken record, but without a good foundation, like you will spend time and time testing with no sign of success in ahead. I had a call with a prospect and he said that his biggest problem for a year has been messaging. So for a year, he's been trying to nail his messaging without success. And I think if we're not seeing it already, we're seeing more and more companies with that length of testing because people are way too focused on the wrong thing, right? Um, so always start with your ICP clarity. The second point is make sure you have enough volume to test. And this might sound, a bit, I guess, easy to understand. But
Mhm.
what I mean by that is if I run LinkedIn ads and I'm running LinkedIn ads with a very small niche that fits my ICP but is too low, and I'm testing for like 4 weeks, I need to make sure I hit enough eyeballs on whether my ads, my message, or whatever I'm using to for it to be statistically significant.
Yeah.
So I worked with a couple of startups that what we're doing is we're running like LinkedIn outbound campaigns just to test messages and to test different offers. And then we sit down and they're like, well, it didn't really work. And then I go back into like the data and everything and I realize, well, we've been sending like a quarter of the volume we should have hit. So we have none of data. We can do any conclusion out of it. We don't even have an hypothesis form. So how the hell can we test those messages and say that we actually brought results? So that's the second point. First, ICP clarity. Second, make sure you have enough testing. And the third one, which is like probably the most important, make sure that you're able to categorize your data. Is it qualitative or is it quantitative? An example is to me, good messaging or getting to message market fit is a mix of ICP alignment, differentiation from your positioning, emotion, clarity, and consistency. So ICP alignment is making sure you hit the right target because if it's not relevant to them, it doesn't make sense at all.
Mhm.
Differentiation because you need to be unique. You need to make sure you push that positioning so your messaging will just be a lot more on par. Your clarity is, again, are you saying stuff that I can understand quickly without you telling me for 20 minutes what's your story and how you changing the world with your startup?
Yeah.
Consistency is, am I talking the same message over and over to have enough impact? A good example of that is LinkedIn post. I talk a lot
Mm.
about messaging. I talk a lot about the problems showcased by my bad messaging. And sometimes I'm seeing people coming up and I'm generating inbound leads because they're like, oh yeah, I've been following your content for a while. it hit a lot of my radar, and now I'm like, okay, I'm ready to buy.
Yeah.
So being top of mind with the same messages I want to try. And the last one is emotion. We buy with emotion. We buy by creating a story. It's making stuff a lot more memorable, right? So those are all qualitative elements. But then do you have the data and like the reply and the volume and the conversion to back it up? Or are you just like hoping that you have like a perfect score without nothing to show for it?
Yeah.
So that's basically how I would treat it. Um, Another example of that is like a fun test that I've been running with a client in the cybersecurity space is LinkedIn text ad. And why I like doing that is, I always kind of define the testing window based on the bandwidth, based on, their budget and everything. But LinkedIn text ad is very cool because even if not my background is not fully on like an expert in LinkedIn ads or paid ads, you can. I got with them. We got like 150,000 impressions for $6
Oh, wow.
because
Okay.
people are only clicking when you're actually you're only paying when they're clicking on the ads. So we run three different text ad with basically like a different set of visual for each, but the same key messages without those three elements. We got pretty much like one of them was all higher in terms of impression, and this one actually got 3 clicks. But then we decided, okay, well, this one is working. The two others not necessarily in like a week span. Let's just use that and let's just increase it a little bit with
Hmm.
other campaigns, other channels, and everything else we're doing. So it's always a question of if you want to define your qualitative elements, you'll be running like 5 second tests, you'll be running preference tests, you'll be running potentially customer surveys and interviews.
Yeah.
But this needs to be done into, okay, what are we trying to define here, right? You should have an
Hmm.
understanding of where you're starting from and what data are you trying to gather. And again, is it qualitative or quantitative? And how can you implement that into what results you're trying to bring?
Yeah. Oh man, I love this. Um, you talked a little bit on are people quickly understanding what you're saying when you're describing your product or service? And I had we have an episode with Zach Messler, and he talked
Nice.
about that a little bit too. And he was
Zach
specific
is
in,
great. I love him.
yeah, he was awesome. He's an awesome guy. He talked a little bit about like asking three specific questions when you're trying to understand a product. And these are good questions to ask to, say, the product manager or the business line leader. And he also works a lot with other tech companies from a more consultative role in product marketing and messaging as well. But he asks, "What is it?" And a lot of times when you ask "What is it?" to someone who's a product leader, you get this really, really long,
Yeah.
expanded answer.
Yeah, you do.
Um, so the first question is, what is it? What does it do? Is the second question. And the third question is, why does it matter? And when you can answer those three questions and have it succinct, that can give a clear answer to someone who wants to know what your product or service does, rather than a really long explanation of what the product is capable of doing. Um, Also, what you were talking about in your answer a little bit is you talked about differentiation. And I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into differentiation. So, how does someone create differentiated messaging, especially in a crowded market and without copying competitors?
First of all, copying competitors it's a bad idea because it's like, if I feel like it's like stealing the personality of someone a little bit. If there's a cool kid that's cool and you're like, oh, he's wearing his backward hat and I'll start to do the same. It's like, I don't know, it sounds just phony a little bit. Um, so I would say I definitely don't recommend to do that. But in terms of the differentiation, the first step to differentiate is to understand what's the current state, right? What's your market? What's your context? What big shift happened? And then are you sure that you understand why would people go with you instead of going with the competition, right? Or going with
Mm-hmm.
an alternative that is like either doing it with Excel or building it yourself or hiring someone full-time to run this. Um, when you understand that aspect, you can come up with a point of view that is sometimes unhinged, sometimes just weird, but it's yours.
Yeah.
So us, like it was hyper contrarian. Like the podcast differentiate in a handful of different ways. First of all, the AI art. Like, oh, we're not marketers, we're dead inside, we're tired of doing marketing stuff and always generating leads. So tree skeleton was a good way to represent us because we're three nobodies. So having a skeleton is a lot more fun than just showing your face, and
Uh,
it's fun because it creates the element of unexpectedness. Oh, I we got this person on the pod. What's going to be their skeleton art? We're curious, and we even got some guests that were like, I want to buy it. I like frame it, do
wow.
something, and we'll buy it. So
Oh,
it's creating a
so
fun
cool.
thing, but it's also the fact that yeah, it's a fun discussion between three guys, and we're challenging each other, and we're trying to tackle subject, and we're trying to do what PMM does best. And to me, it's creating quick feedback loops. Every time that I'm talking to a PMM that listens to the pod, I try to understand, is there anything that you would like us to talk about or that you feel would help you in your role or whatever else? And just that is a good way of like keep doing things. But to go back to your question, like if you're not scared of talking about the alternatives and believing that they are not good, this is when you can get people that will agree with you and people that won't. And when you get that kind of, I guess, that difference of opinion, you're starting to get differentiated. You're starting to push stuff up. And I think this should be the beginning. Don't think about, oh, we need to have better AI in the competition. And again, a lot of product people thinks that way. But what you need to do is just come up with something that is vastly different from your market context. So if you're in the CRM space and everyone is saying the same thing, can you have a lighter version of a solution that you want to create that will ultimately be more accessible than the rest? Can you stop touching at some stuff? Can you do it for a specific niche? There's a lot of different ways, and I feel differentiation is kind of like that hidden treasure that a lot of startups and companies are looking after, but it's not that complicated up to the point. There's multiple layers to it, but once you understand your context, it's a lot better to come up with not the backward hat, but maybe with like I don't know, you come up at school and you have like a hemo style, but like whoa, what's this dude doing? You know,
Oh
I
man.
was not an emo by the way. Just wanted to put that out there.
I didn't think so. Just off prior conversations. Um, do you find that there are questions that you can ask during customer calls that would help in defining differentiation for a product that you are doing the marketing for?
100%. The question I like to ask the most actually is, well, first of all, you need it to be timely. So people that you close within the last 3 months because it's still fresh in their mind.
Hmm.
And I like to try to understand what are the 3 to 5 solutions you took a look at before choosing us. It doesn't need to be just straight up competitors. It can be indirect solution, can be we tried to build it ourselves, can be a lot of different stuff. And then try to understand, well, was it a tight race? Was it like our pricing? Was it anything else? And just jot it down. Jot it down into what it is. That way, if you're able to kind of see patterns that people are replying, oh, it's because you guys, like V2 Cloud, it was you guys are showcasing your pricing while everyone else is hiding it. Like this differentiation can be as simple as that. You show pricing. It's back in 2018, 2019. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you're showcasing the pricing on the homepage. Good job. We'll go with you, almost. Um, but asking that, and another question I like to ask that is not necessarily, I think it's helpful to your positioning more than to your differentiation, but it's at the beginning of a sales call, right? You're a sales rep or you're a PMM shadowing a sales rep on a call to just get insight. Just ask this question and don't say anything else afterward. Just go with the call. In what category would you put our product? Just that. and then jot down the answer and move on. Don't explain it. Don't even say what the answer is, but just jot it down. Oh, you guys are a database, right? Oh, yeah, sure. When we might not be a database, maybe you're a data warehouse, maybe you're even like a tool like Power BI. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing is, now you have an answer on how people are perceiving you. You understand your external positioning, and you can start working towards it, right? If people are
Yeah.
telling a category that you don't reflect, or you've been trying to push a new category for a couple of months, this is kind of like a temperature test that you can run, and ultimately it can very much fuel your positioning and your differentiation, because if your category, or if people are aligning you to a category that you're not considered in, then maybe you need to tweak some stuff to be closer to that. And in this different submarket, it might be a stronger play too.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great piece of advice. I can just imagine a PMM sitting on a call. They ask that question, what category would you put us in? And then the prospect says something that is like not even remotely close. How much that would just drive you up a wall of like wanting to fix the
It
answer,
happened to
but
me a couple of times. Yeah,
you
it's
want
not
to
fun.
fix the answer.
It's not a
Yeah,
fun
you might
feeling,
not
but
feel.
it's insightful.
I can't imagine the feeling afterwards. They say something, different from what you're expecting, and you're like, ah, oh, damn it, I'm not doing my job well. But it's like that's an awesome question to ask to really get insight and learn of like how are you positioned in the minds of your prospects and customers. It's also interesting to think that they're on a demo call potentially with you, and they think of your tool completely different from what they agreed to get a demo of almost. Like, yeah, oh man, good question. I love that. I'm going to use that.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, feel free to. To be honest, I don't know how I came up with it, but I know that when I started asking it, it was like kind of almost life changing, because and again, it's not that scalable. You can still run surveys up to a point. I seen company ask run surveys like, in what category would you put X company, and you can kind of just run with that. But when you do it on sales calls, when you just ask like a sales rep that you're buddy with, that you help them like achieve their quota, or you help them like write messaging when they were BDR a couple of years ago or whatever, it's just such a good way of just gathering data, and be like, hey, sales, we might have a positioning problem. Let's work with the VP of sales. Let's do something so we can come up to the CEO and be, hey, we need to maybe tackle those elements, instead of being like April Dunford said it on our podcast. Like, if you're a PMM and you come up to, or even if you're a VP of marketing and just come up to like the CEO and you're like, hey, our positioning sucks. Good luck. You
all
don't want
right,
to be the
listen to that.
person screaming, let's tweak things out. You want to come up with ammunition. And what better way to come up with ammunition when you go directly into the center of revenue, sales, right? If the VP of sales understands that there's a problem because you've been asking that question, and it's creating false expectation of prospects, that's that's a big signal that you need to do something about it.
Yeah, I remember listening to that episode because um, who is the CEO most likely going to listen to the most? It's going to be that VP or head of sales. And when you have
Yeah.
them, if you are able to have conversations with them and provide them with insight that, hey, maybe our positioning really sucks, and then you're able to show the head of sales why you're saying that, and then you come into the CEO and you have that person backing you up on what you're saying, they're going to listen rather than just
Yeah,
one
and that's
person.
money.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yes, you need that kind of influence internally.
Yep. Oh man, so good. So, um, I wanted to jump into a question here. We're talking a little bit about strategy. So I saw you reference Robert Kaminsky. I think you guys had him on your podcast recently. His stuff, if you don't
Yeah.
know who he is or you don't follow him on LinkedIn and you're in product marketing, would highly suggest that. Him and Anthony Pereira from Fletch. They, I've learned so much from them just following them on LinkedIn.
They're
Amazing
great.
stuff. Yeah, amazing
They're
stuff.
amazing. Yeah. I aspire to be like 5% like what those guys are posting, and I'll die happy.
Yeah, yeah. They give out so much free information to people. You can also pay, I think, for a Notion database for $50 a year, which is also very inexpensive, with tons of insightful
Yeah,
information in there. But Robert had a take on business strategy, product strategy, and positioning strategy all being connected. How do you create messaging that supports all three elements of that strategy?
that's a good question. To me, you know, I feel like messaging falls under the positioning aspect, the differentiation aspect. For sure, you'll take elements from the product strategy, you'll take elements from the business strategy, but ultimately your positioning will drive your messaging. The way you're trying to differentiate will directly impact how relevant your messages are. Um, and then it's a question of circling back to that product strategy and circling back to, what currently sucks. What ways have you been trying to achieve X? And this is, again, the market opportunity a little bit. A good example of a startup I started using a little bit, freckled.io, freckled with an S. Um, Basically, I'm not a technical guy. I've been trying my hands at Clay a little bit, mainly for data enrichment. And Freckle is an alternative for Clay that don't require you to, being a technical guy, technically. So like basically, and they also just work with Fletch as well. So I think it's a good segue. But like their homepage is directly, it's like Clay without the learning curve. Freckle is a Clay alternative for non-technical user, unlike your best outbound campaigns with easy enrichment, research, and cleanup template to your lead list. We directly have the capabilities. This is all the tool is doing right now. They just raised I think a 2 million round. So this is money, right? Like this is exactly their positioning. They saw a market opportunity that Clay was growing. It's a good community. There's a lot of Clay agency out there that popped up over the last, I want to say, year and a half or
Mm-hmm.
so. So you have that. Then you have your product strategy. Like right now, they seem to be focusing a lot on like enrichment, research, and cleanup, but maybe they want to tackle more stuff. Maybe they want to add more use case that would actually make sense to who they're trying to target. And then it's just circling back to again that positioning strategy. They're different because it's not the ramp up time, it's not the technical stuff, and they are very generous with their credit as well. I'm not saying Clay is expensive, but when you get that fear of missing out and when you want to really use it in a way where it makes sense, it's difficult for you to do a 2 weeks trial, start ramping it up, spend 10, 20 hours learning the thing, doing a course, trying to understand it, and then having to pay. I don't know the starting point, but having to pay like kind of an investment to try to use it in a way where your ramp up time would fit the capabilities of what you're trying to do. So I think good example like that, like Freckles is doing, and it's not with an S, by the way. I Freckle, not an S.io. I think it's just a good example of that, right? You have to understand that those two elements, that kind of triumvirate a little bit, is just a way for you to understand that context and
Mm-hmm.
making sure that your founder or your leading team understand it as well, understand the intricacy between them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great example. Great example. Thank you for sharing that one. I have heard of
Happy to
it.
help.
Yeah, I have heard of. You said freckles. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
.io.
yep, a lot of people have heard of Clay as well. They seem to have some type of, I don't know, whoever's running their marketing. I see it all over the place on LinkedIn and other channels like that. They also have a really just kind of like user generated content. It seems they've dived into that a lot too, and they have a lot of people just creating content for them, creating content of them using Clay. But I have heard that
Yeah,
sneak in a little bit of it being a somewhat difficult solution to learn and ramp up on. Um, and I love what you said. I think you read their homepage messaging, but it's the word, and this was also brought up with Zach on his episode, talking about the power of the word without. The word without, it can
yeah,
be used in your positioning, your messaging, and your
so good.
copywriting. Yeah. It gives such definition to someone of what they're getting.
Yeah. You want to eliminate potential doubt. If I tell you, oh, get 5 to 10 leads, a week on LinkedIn, you'll be like, cool. But then I tell you, it's all outbound, baby. You'll have to send a ton of message. You'll have to reach out to people. You have to create prospecting lists. You'll be like, oh, I'll find other ways to get that 5 to 10 leads. But if I tell you get 5 to 10 leads on LinkedIn without outbound, the context is vastly different. You'll be like, oh shit. Now I don't even need to send out messages. What's this way? I'm curious about it. I want to learn more about it. The why, the without, sorry, in that case is, again, to paraphrase Zach, I think it's super, super powerful.
So we have a lightning round here, and basically just kind of close out questions that are good takeaways for anyone who's listening. But what is one piece of messaging advice you'd give to listeners that they can take away and implement tomorrow?
I would say try to bring context as much as possible and set things up based on what your customers are telling you. So this goes well with copy as well, but when you're able to understand, okay, I'm able to bring context a little bit like that without that we were talking about earlier, it just drives the point home so much. And when you're able to do it in a way where, people have been telling you stuff and like you're just able to kind of explain it in a way where it's easier, it makes all of the difference.
Clarity and context to what you're saying. Good.
Yep.
Love it. More personal question. If you could put it into a single sentence, what is living all about for you?
Memorable and difficult stuff while evolving at the same time.
Love this question. We always get some really good insight from people here. Thank you, Gab. Thank you for answering that. If listeners found what you shared valuable, what can they do to help lift you up?
Thank you. I post on LinkedIn 5 times a week. I try to. So Gab Bujold on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm also on the We're Not Marketers podcast with Eric Holland and Zach Roberts. So we're trying to post at least 15 episodes per season. We're starting our season 4 in 2025. So very excited about that. And that's pretty much it. I do stuff on YouTube as well, not putting lots of effort into it. And I have an email newsletter that is not live yet, but everyone that downloads my assets, my frameworks, my freebies, whatever, how you want to call it, they get into it. And then I'm just the one that is, bugging you because I have new resources and I need feedback. So just become a big hellhole of me bugging you to get your feedback. But yeah, you can find me on all of those places.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you found what Gab said today, feel free to go follow him, listen to the We're Not Marketers podcast, get on that newsletter. I've downloaded some of his, freebies and things that he's given away. They're really good. So Gab, thank you so much for coming on today. It was awesome having you.
Thank you very much, Josh. It was awesome.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.